dear. It is like church. Y'all sitting in the back. Yes. My brother is a minister. He's taught me about projection. You're still going to hear. Okay? I'm going to leave this door open if it's okay with folks. All right? My name's Julia Sherman. I'm with the Wisconsin Alcohol Policy Project at the University of Wisconsin Law School, and I am not an attorney. So just so we get that clear. But I work with a whole bunch of them, lovely people. I hope, oh, thank you so much. Now I don't feel lonely. The nice thing about a group this size is that we can do it informally. So how about if any of you have any questions as we go through this, you just sing out, okay? I brought a couple of handouts. You may need them, you may not want them. You don't have to take them to make me feel good, okay? I'll recycle them later. But if in fact you have a reason and you want to take more than one, you should feel free, because that's what they're there for, okay? Tonight, what we're going to talk about for a little while is about creating an alcohol environment. Most states, people do have to react to the alcohol environment they have. But in Wisconsin, we can create an alcohol environment. Now, most of us kind of treat the alcohol environment like a big old asteroid that fell from the sky and boom, landed on us, right? It's Wisconsin, right? It's always been this way. We're all German. Well, maybe not all of us. Lots of breweries are here, right? It's just always been party, party, party. There's one problem with that story. It ain't true. I spent some time in the archives of our Wisconsin Historical Society, and I prepared this first document over here, which is in fact a detailed timeline. Oh, I shouldn't have walked out of your sight, I'm sorry. Okay. A detailed timeline about alcohol history in Wisconsin. And you know what I found out? I found out that we were just as divided as the rest of the nation. In fact, Wisconsin, most of the land in Wisconsin and about half the population had already voted itself dry before Prohibition. Who would have thought it, right? We didn't run the Prohibitionists or the Temperance Association out of town in Wisconsin. And the reason I know that is because this is a picture of the United Temperance League in their 1963 booth, 63, right? 1963 booth at the Wisconsin State Fair. We have been just as conflicted about alcohol and its role in society as the rest of the nation has. So let's set aside this idea that it has always been in Wisconsin this way. It hasn't. The other thing to think about is that beginning in the 1970s, in 1975, was with the beginning of alcohol policy as an academic topic. Before that, people did what they thought was right. You know, the alders voted for things we all heard, that more places that sold alcohol, that was economic development, right? People did what they perceived to be the right thing. In 1975 was the first scholarly work, and guess what? It wasn't done in the United States. It was done by Finnish, British, and Canadian researchers. It wasn't until 1995, 20 years later, that we saw the first book, Alcohol Policy and the Public Good, that was put out laying out specific things that were evidence-based and evidence-formed. And at that point, we began to understand that there were 4 factors that influence our alcohol environment. In Wisconsin, we use a memory trick to remember it, and it's the 4 A's. It comes down to how available alcohol is, how acceptable alcohol is, how attractive alcohol is, that's about marketing, right? And how affordable alcohol is. Now, what allows us to create our own alcohol environment is that the first 3 are controlled municipally in Wisconsin. You control it when you go vote for your alders, your county supervisors. In many states, their alcohol licenses are awarded by a panel of 5 people. Well, I just might as well say, hey, 5 white guys. They're appointed by the governor, and they determine who gets the license and when it's open, how big it can be. In Wisconsin, those decisions are made locally, not by a state board. We don't have a liquor law enforcement agency. You know, in Texas, they have liquor cops, literally. It's a liquor law enforcement agency that is actually larger than our state patrol. Here it's handled by our local police for most of it. Some things the county sheriff. We regulate alcohol locally. There are places in the United States where people literally picketed on the streets to get some of the rights that you have with regards to alcohol control. So let's use them, right? If we have the ability and the authority to create our alcohol environment, and now we know how to improve it, there's no reason for us not to get down to business and start doing it, right? So that's what I want to talk about this evening. Remember the 4 A's. We will be coming back to them, though, okay? One of the things we have to think about is drinking patterns, because our drinking pattern matters a lot in the sorts of interventions we adopt. Let's say I drank 365 drinks a year. Okay, wine, I'll tell you, I'm a wine drinker. So, 365, 1 a night, low risk drinking, minimal chance of harm. I have raised my cancer risk slightly, however. If I try to drink it just on say 3-day weekends, I'm drinking about 10 drinks each day. That raises the chance of an acute accident much, much higher, right? And it's heavy drinking on those 3 days. I try to drink it on just the 4 weeks of vacation, and there's a special word for what I would be at the end of my vacation. Dead. I could not drink 91 drinks in a week. I am body mass and height challenge. Come on in, sit down. Get yourself a sandwich, though. All right, good. Good. The chances that I would have 13 drinks in a day, I mean, would I even be standing? Oh, I think the gentleman wants you to go around the side. All right. Now, this is how that relates, those drinking patterns. Am I still in your spot? Drinking patterns relate to Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, we know that self-reported 24% of the adult population over age 18, that includes those 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that shouldn't be drinking anyway, 24% self-report that they binge drinks about once a week, and when they binge drink, they have 7, 8 beverages as the average high, okay? Once a week, 7 to 8 beverages, okay? 24% of the population. Now, I'm going to do something you will never hear again. I'm going to compare us to Utah. We never get compared to Utah. Would you believe that in Utah, the person that's binge drinking, they binge drink about once a week. And when they binge drink, they drink about 7 alcohol beverages. They sound like us, except it's 11% of the population, not 24% of the population. The average for the United States is about 17% of the population, and we all know there's no state named average out there, but it gives us a benchmark to look at. Binge drinking is the real issue. You know how we always read about that guy who's got his 10th OWI in the paper, and then someone from the Tavern League trundles out and says, the problem is the dedicated alcoholic drunk driver, and we got to get him off the roads. Alcohol-dependent people are only about 7 to 8% of our population. The real problem is that 24% of our adult population, our neighbors, our friends, our family, they're binge drinking about once a week and drinking 7 to 8 beverages. In fact, 75% of the cost of excessive alcohol use falls on binge drinking. 75% of the cost of excessive alcohol use is binge drinking. So that's why in Wisconsin we focus our efforts on 2 things: adult binge drinking and underage drinking. Obviously, there are a lot of good reasons to get against underage drinking, but binge drinking is really a problem, and it has consequences. We drink, on average, 22% more alcohol per capita than any other state. Okay? We drink 22% more alcohol. These numbers are a little bit old. They're 2011, but I saw the 2017 numbers the other day, and they haven't changed much. We drink a little less wine than everybody else. We drink more distilled spirits, must be those brandy Manhattans, right? And we drink way more beer than everybody else. Part of the reason we have so many problems is we have more people drinking more alcohol. Most states, about 50% of the population drinks once a month or so. Okay? 50% of the population. In Wisconsin, that's 63 to 65% of the adult population. So we have more people drinking more. And of that 63%, 24% of the population self-reports that they are binge drinking about once a week or more. So now you understand the scope of the problem, right? But we can use the 4 A's to help get that under control. Oh, forgot to give you the bad news. This is what happens. Now, you may have heard, come on in. Hey, you may have heard that the drunk driving is a big problem. If I woke you up in the middle of the night, came to your house, shook you, and said, wake up, what's the real alcohol problem in this state? What would you probably say? Drunk driving, right. But look at this. 17% of our acute deaths are coming from vehicle crashes. More than twice as many come from alcohol-related falls. And the vast majority of those are people that are 65 and older. There's a technical term for that. Nana's getting hammered. Okay? We have a serious alcohol excessive drinking problem among our senior citizens. That's not to minimize the tragedy of drunk driving or impaired crashes. Not minimizing at all. Victims are truly and completely, in many cases, they're innocent people that are just there and killed. But we can't, in our zeal to deal with that issue, overlook the fact that alcohol is a contributing factor in homicide, suicide, completed suicide, self-harm, and alcohol poisoning, okay? Because every year it happens at UW-Madison, I'm willing to happen at UWM, it happens at every campus in this state. Kids drink too much, and somebody, in essence, kills themselves because they drank too much. Sometimes they fall asleep in a snowdrift somewhere and unintentionally die of hypothermia. One young man in River Falls fell into a church sign, broke it, and bled to death on the glass cuts. Bad things happen. As you'll see up there, acute deaths are slightly more of those, that means the incident, then it happens, than the disease-related deaths, okay? But here's the bad news. I know, I'm just the cheerful girl, right? Disease is catching up, all right? The Wisconsin Cancer Council has made excessive alcohol use one of their top priorities. And the reason for that is 7 different types of cancer have a causal relationship with alcohol. Mouth, throat, larynx, esophageal, female breast, liver, and colorectal cancer, okay? Female breast cancer, that makes me insane when I see in Breast Cancer Awareness Month pink alcohol, it says, we're supporting breast cancer research. Yeah, and they're also supporting breast cancer. The amount of advertising that has been directed at young women in the past decade has really going to show up in about 20 years. Because it's not only the amount you drink, it's the long-term exposure in these cases. So girls that began drinking as teenagers and keep it up are really increasing their risk of breast cancer. And it's something you can and should discuss with your physician. But that's not all. Wait, there's more. Heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, liver cirrhosis, depression, anxiety. Alcohol contributes to a wide range of healthcare issues. So we're going to see that evening out in the coming years. But why are communities rethinking alcohol? Really? I mean, I doubt any alderman, unless they've had a personal issue with it, sits down and talks about breast cancer at a city council meeting, right? It just does not happen. Well, let me tell you why. Because the cost of excessive alcohol use, not just binge drinking, all excessive alcohol use, is about $6.8 billion annually. One of the reasons I say about and approximately all the time is in Wisconsin, we don't keep records of a lot of things. We're very good at not determining what we really don't want to know. So there are no records that tell us exactly how many police calls for service are alcohol related. But when I ask chiefs of police, they know. And they tell me generally that it's 60 to 80%. I did have one chief say it was over 90% in his community. I will not be moving there. So in fact, if you think about it, if one particular substance was responsible for 60 to 80% of your police calls for service, and you could cut down that misuse, it has the potential to cut down calls for service. Hey, that might cut taxes or at least hold them steady. It's a great thing, right? Remember that, okay? So when you start talking about the alcohol environment you don't want, okay? You don't want to live in a community where 90% of the alcohol, where it calls for service or for alcohol. You don't want to live in a community where you step out of your apartment and you step into a pool of vomit. I've had that glorious experience. It's special. Cigarette butts are also a problem in some neighborhoods in Madison. That you think about what you do want that community to be, and that helps you frame what you want your community alcohol environment to be. If you have a goal and you know where you want to be, it's easier to frame the plan to get there, right? Of course it is. Now, the Village of Oregon, great place, 3,000 people. They did not have a serious alcohol-related problems. They let a couple of quick trips in, saw their underage drinking skyrocket, somebody wasn't looking, and decided they needed to look at how they were selling and serving alcohol in their community, okay? And so they went back to their planning documents, and it turned out their planning documents said they basically wanted to be the best place in Dane County to raise a family. That's a great goal, isn't it? They knew they weren't going to, the University of Wisconsin was not moving to Oregon, Wisconsin. Neither was a big factory. They weren't going to have a big tech sector, but they could create the best place to raise a family in Dane County. And they found language in their planning document, their long-term plan, that allowed them to say what they wanted their alcohol environment to be. And they set about preserving the good alcohol environment they had in their community. It doesn't all have to be remedial action. There are lots of communities that are on the cusp and just starting to see things are going a little sour. They can take steps to preserve the good alcohol environment they have, all right? And that is beautiful downtown Oregon. When it comes to the availability of alcohol, those licenses are issued locally, right? If you don't remember anything else tonight, I want you to remember this. There is no right to an alcohol license under Wisconsin law. it can be denied for any reason that is not discriminatory or arbitrary. The city council can't say, no, it's raining, we don't want to do it today. And they can't say no short chicks, Julia. That would be discriminatory. But they can say, and have said, we don't need another bar in this town. We don't need every gas station to be selling alcohol. The police say they cannot provide services to all the alcohol-related calls for service now. We respectfully decline your application, okay? This is really super important because what does the number of alcohol licenses relate to? I'll give you a hint, it begins with A. Availability of alcohol, right. Now you do have to provide the reason in writing. That's why God created municipal attorneys, many of whom are graduates of the esteemed institution I work at. But you do have to tell them. But it's virtually any reason, okay? However, there's always a but, right? Once awarded, that license can only be non-renewed, revoked, or suspended for cause, okay? So once you give it to them, it's very hard to get it back, all right? Well, what would that indicate to you? You should be careful, right? Yeah, because you're going to be stuck with them. Far too many communities are not perhaps as careful as they should be or could be. So you as citizens, you can get involved. And lots of citizens throughout Wisconsin have been getting involved in this. By the way, this picture, this is what happens when you go on Google Images and do bar fight Wisconsin. That's what comes up. No one says I can't have fun. The reason you need to watch this is because in the last 5-10 years, there has been a growing body of evidence about the number and location of alcohol outlets, okay? And eventually, about 5 years ago, the Centers for Disease Control came to a conclusion. They looked at the evidence from all around the world, because this just isn't a Wisconsin problem or an American problem. It's an Australian problem, and boy, it's a Canadian problem. And it's a British problem and a Finnish problem as well. It's a human problem, okay? Yes, ma'am?
I find it funny that we speak about how it's a Canadian issue, but if you get a DUI, you cannot go over into Canada. They won't allow you to go into Canada.
All right, right, yeah. They react a lot differently to it. As a matter of fact, some of their provinces even maintain a monopoly. They actually have a state monopoly on alcohol in some of their provinces. Yeah, some of the systems they had in Scandinavia for years were totally draconian. When the Finnish government decided that people were drinking too much, they just closed the state stores an extra day a week. I could just see how well that'd go over here, can you? Yeah. But what?
A state monopoly on alcohol?
They did. I don't believe they do any longer. What they discovered is that when you have a higher number of alcohol outlets, you will have a higher rate of alcohol-related crime and disorder, even if everybody obeys the law. Now let's think back to a couple seconds ago. What does that mean? It means that if I've issued too many alcohol licenses and I have a higher rate of alcohol-related crime and disorder, and everybody's obeying the law, it's going to be a long, hard road for me to dig my way out of it, okay? That's why communities need to think carefully. I can pretty much guarantee that there is not a community in this state that is on the cutting edge of losing their only liquor store, right? Or their only bar. Most communities have an ample supply of alcohol. You don't have to issue more, okay? Wausau, a few years ago, determined that they had a problem. And this was a little summary written by Lisa Rasmussen, who was president of the city council. And she wrote the story up of how over 2 years they improved their alcohol environment and what they did. The first thing was they had to revoke a couple of licenses, and it was expensive, and it was difficult, and it was long overdue. After that, they turned to the process to award alcohol licenses, okay? The first thing they did was get local involvement, create a committee that looked at it, and the second thing they did was create standards. You know how they were awarding licenses in alcohol? First come, first serve. First guy in the door got the license. That's a dumb way to issue licenses. Another community in Wisconsin, when they had too many applications for only one full bar license, one combination license left under the quota, they cut cards. They cut cards, literally. They got a stack of cards, whoever had the high card at the end. Yep. How about communities in Wisconsin consider their alcohol environment and their application process and then come up with standards like these? If anybody's interested in reading this little story, it's only about 5-6 pages, but it's really nice. I'm happy to email it to you. I've got a PDF of it, okay? But the question of how many is too many is a local decision. Now, we aren't the only place struggling with this because, one, the CDC has not given us a number. And it's not because they're being chicken. It's because there are so many variables. How big is it? How is it licensed in that community? Is it a restaurant or a tavern? They couldn't account for all that. But they did give us a map on how we can measure some things. And it's that booklet there. It was made available in 2017. I've got the URL for that on that, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. The point is each community is going to decide what exact number works for them. Do you want them X feet apart? Some communities in Wisconsin say there has to be 1,000 feet between an outlets, or 500 feet maybe in a more rural area, urban area. Yes, ma'am.
So you're talking like bars, stores, anything that sells alcohol?
Yeah. There are basically two types of places. They're the place that sell it to you and you go home or elsewhere. And there's the place where you sit down and you drink it there. In Wisconsin, we have just 2 flavors. We don't even have 3 flavors. And we're nowhere near Baskin-Robbins. Class A, drink it away, okay? Class A, off premises. Class B, a lot of people think Class B bar, and that's correct, but it's also restaurants and taverns and any place where you sit down and you drink it there, okay? We only have 2 general types of licenses. Some states have as many as 17 different types of licenses, but we're kind of sensible here. As grounded Midwesterners, we figured we only needed 1, covered it all there. So when we look at alcohol outlets, you can in fact count just the on-premises, just the Class B, and you can count the Class A separately if you wanted to, because believe it or not, they create different problems. A kid who's 14 years old, but he started to get like a little bit beard and he stole his cousin's ID, right? He ain't gonna go into a bar and order a pink squirrel. No, he's gonna try to go to a convenience store, right? And muscle through when there's a line and get a 6-pack of Keystone Light or something like that, right? So off-premises locations, especially convenience stores, you're more likely to see underage drinking pop. Bars and restaurants and taverns, they bring a different set of problems. You're more likely to get drunk driving at those. You're more likely to get fights at those, okay? You're more likely to have what they call amenity issues. That's the public urination, it's the trash, it's the noise, things like that. That's going to be on premises. I mean, if you think about it, it's not exactly, rocket science what's it going to be. But each one does create a different set of problems, and a lot of communities look at them differently. And there is information on the internet now, created by our Wisconsin Department of Health Services, that can help you look at how many bars in both categories, Class A and Class B, licensees, there are in your community. So you've got resources that can help you out. But back to our story, okay? So in 2017, we learned how we could calculate it, which really is a good thing to do because then you can decide for your community, as opposed to how it had been being done before, which was basically people saying, well, we don't want any more in this neighborhood, but we can't say no more in town, so how about 1,000 feet apart or a half-mile apart, something like that, okay? Well-intentioned and smart, but this is going to be better for planning purposes. Alcohol licensing, remember how I talked about Wausau came up with guidelines? Well, here are some of them. They created that subcommittee. Then they looked at management experience, a business plan. So bright. A lot of places still don't ask for a business plan. Neighborhood impact statement, outlet density. See, Lisa had been reading this stuff. She knew what was going on. Proximity to other Class B licensees, schools. And then they decided to use those as their criteria, okay? They also refigured their demerit system. A lot of communities have demerit systems, point systems, where they grade bars. The problem is, in some places, it turns into this huge plea bargain and nobody ever gets to 100 or 50 or whatever it takes to revoke or suspend. So they redid their system to make it more effective. And they did this by ordinance. Guidelines have another value. These are the guidelines that were adopted in Oregon. Because you have a set of guidelines, theirs are also in their municipal ordinances sitting right in front of the city council. They can go down the list, or village board in this case, and say, did they pass this? Did they do this? Did they do that? How is it going to impact this? How does the guy next door feel? Because they also include the impact on adjacent properties. It's all there. And if you've got standards, that means everybody's going to be evaluated the same way, which means it's unlikely anybody will be rejected arbitrarily, right? Guidelines help you make consistent, reasoned decisions that move you towards your goal. Now, you may fight like cats and dogs over your guidelines, but once you have them, they actually reduce the likelihood of litigation because you've got it out there. You can send people away. If an applicant doesn't meet your guidelines, you can say, no. You can table it, and you can say, come back, these are our guidelines. Meet these guidelines. It's not a secret, it's not who you know, it's how can we move our community towards a better alcohol environment, okay? Alcohol licensing is also not a yes/no decision, I know. I gotta tell you, the signs in Wausau are worth the drive. It is just amazing to me. And these aren't even the really crazy ones. This is one of the tame, I don't want to shock you people in the South here. A municipality can stick on license conditions, okay? Right on the license. A license condition is an issue that would be too small to handle as an ordinance. For example, all those cigarette butts out front of my apartment building, when the bar up the street changed hands, we got a license condition tagged on that they, after closing every night, had to sweep the sidewalk. Voila, no more license. Didn't cost anybody anything. Solved a big problem from our standpoint, but you wouldn't exactly ever do an ordinance that says every bar, every licensed establishment has to sweep the sidewalk. You wouldn't do that. License condition lets you deal with very small issues, amenity issues. issues that are really irritating to your local alderman when you call them about them at 2 a.m. So they like these by and large, okay? They can also fit a wide variety. I did a survey of about 40 communities in Wisconsin a couple years ago. The results are on my website. I didn't bring them down, but you can get them off the website, and I've got my card. If you just want to drop me an email, I'll send it to you. But look at some of the things they did. No single sale bottles of cans. In other words, nobody goes into a convenience store and buys one beer to take it home and put it in the refrigerator, right? No single serving sales there. Flavored malt beverages may not be sold less than a 6-pack. Ah, that means the kids, those big juice cans, things like Four Loko, you have to buy those in a 4-pack or a 6-pack, which really makes it a lot more expensive for those kids, right? Not quite as popular. No more than 3 coolers for the alcohol. Has anybody ever been in one of these stores, not so much in the southern part of the state, but more in the central and northern part of the state, where you buy some gas, you pump, and you go in, and it looks not like a convenience store, but like a liquor store with the gas pumps in front of it? Saying how much of the floor space they can use to display alcohol, you can do that as a license condition. There's another way to do it, but this works too. No space on the floor will be used for alcohol sales. In other words, nobody just piles big, I mean, how many times have we all gone into the grocery store and basically had a mountain of beer sitting in front of us, right? Okay. Now for on-premises licensees, you can require that they meet the community's definition of a restaurant. You can actually have closing times that are different. Food must be available whenever it is open. Is anyone familiar with the phrase morphing? Oh, this is good. Because you have it in this city, because every big city has it. It's a restaurant. But at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock when the kitchen closes, all the table and chairs get pushed to the side, and the DJ comes on, and it's a nightclub for 200 or 300 people. And that's till 2 a.m. They opened as a restaurant, but a restaurant and a club both need what? A Class B license, right? So unless you say they have to be serving food all the time, the kitchen can close and it's club time, which a club when it closes at 2 a.m. causes a lot more problems for the local police than when a restaurant closes, okay? They may be really full after eating that heavy steak and waddle to the car. But if 300 people that have been dancing and drinking for 4 hours come out, it's a horse of a different color, isn't it? Okay? I love this one. Noise agreement about dumping. I see more license conditions about dumping for bars that are in neighborhoods. Okay? I live in a neighborhood, there's a bar kitty corner from me, but the dumpsters are on the other side. They're not by me. But I did live 8 stories up from the Great Dane for a while. And I can tell you, I knew when they emptied their recycling every night. But if you've got a toddler sleeping, you're going to wake up the baby, right? So neighborhoods, when they dump their trash after closing and they're recycling, it makes a lot of noise. It disturbs the neighborhood. If a community is involved in the licensing process, you can put on a license condition because often it just never occurred to them that anybody cared. It's amazing when the problems are brought forth in the licensing process, what you can put on as a license condition. And here's the really exciting part. If they violate them, it's just as if they violated a city ordinance or state law. They could be disciplined. So it's got some teeth there, okay? I don't think if anybody made a mistake and took out the trash at 2 in the morning, they'd revoke their license. However, the point is they're looking at this and agreeing to it from the beginning. I have seen as many as 15 license conditions added to a single license. And I'm delighted to say that I helped attach all 15. Now, let's go back and finish up on licensing for a second, if we can. So what does licensing relate to? Which A? the availability of alcohol, okay? You can look at the density in your community. You can look at how alcohol licenses are awarded, and you can look at alcohol license conditions. Now, Wisconsin does not require a great deal in the way of procedure. Wisconsin law requires that, wait for it, it's a long list. You use an application form that they give you. Most places slap it on a Xerox machine and just run it through on their letterhead. Milwaukee does it a little bit better than that, okay? You have to publish it in the local newspaper, okay? And then you have to vote on it. The final awarding has to be awarded by the full governmental body, the full village board. That's it. Everything else is added by the community. So there are over 1,000, there are probably over 1,500 different ways that communities award alcohol licenses in Wisconsin. And that other handout I've got was created in cooperation with the Wisconsin Association of Local Health Departments and Boards, WALDAB. And we created something anybody can go through and ask questions. And when you answer those questions and you get to the end of it, you will know the local alcohol licensing process in your community. I'm going to grab one of those. They're not that thick. And if you look in here, I believe it is on page. Somebody sing the Jeopardy song. Very good. There we go. Here we go. Page 15, you will see a little chart, okay? On the page 15 chart, the things that I just talked about are outlined in black, okay? Everything else that's in gray is optional, but your community can request it. There are communities in Wisconsin where the guy walks out, fills out the single form, walks up and hands it to the city council, who then hands it to the guy who's the local newspaper there, prints it, and then the next time the village board gets together, they get an alcohol license. But those are becoming fewer and fewer, okay? People are beginning to understand the impact that alcohol licensing is having on their community because it deals with the availability of alcohol, all right? Feel free to take as many of those as you need if you're working with your neighbors or your friends. It's also on the website of the Wisconsin Alcohol Policy Project. That website's listed on here too, because sometimes it takes a couple of people to get working together to figure out exactly how alcohol licenses are awarded in your community. And it's really hard to have an impact on a process you don't understand, right? So I wish I could tell you exactly how it's done, but I can do the next best, which is tell you how you can find out about it. All right? Any questions about availability? Yes, ma'am.
Did you hear about the new bill that's been introduced by the Senate just like in the last couple of days?
Do I need to sit down?
Maybe.
Okay.
About availability.
Okay.
They're trying. Trying to pull it up so I can find the bill now. It's Senate Bill 203. And the only reason I know it is because one of them is our senator that I was just talking to.
You can talk to him again.
They want to be able to change the, so on the municipality law, or the municipality rules now that it is a committee or a board that makes those decisions. They want to change it to it's only allocate one person to have that role?
I am familiar with that bill. It's not for all licenses. It's only for operators permits, I believe.
Okay. That's okay.
And that's a big difference, yeah.
So
But I will go back and look. We will talk before the evening's over, and I will take that number back with me. There is a bill. There are actually companions. It has passed the Assembly. It's gone to the Senate. And a companion bill simply means that identical bills were, introduced in both houses. Right now, a city council has to vote on every bartender's license. That takes up time. And so in an effort to streamline it, I mean, if somebody is patently unqualified to be a bartender, and communities have a lot less discretion there than they have with the actual establishment, they usually get bumped. Many communities have checklists that says don't even bother applying if if any of these apply to you.
I thought there was an amendment to it though, that was to add, that was to follow through with not just the licensees, but the licenses.
Well, I'm unaware of that,
Okay.
and I will find out more about it, okay? That would be a fundamental change, and I would be stunned if that was the case, because that would put all the responsibility on the clerk or whoever that individual is, and that is something that most clerks would not want, that responsibility. So let's, before we break up tonight, let me find out more about that, and I will get back to you, okay? All right, because that would be a dangerous thing. One of the things we can be very fortunate about is so far our Wisconsin League of Municipalities and our local elected official has done a good job of retaining that local control, because it is such a powerful tool, okay? Were any of you involved in tobacco control at all? Okay, then you know that local preemption is, yeah, exactly. That was the word I was looking for. It sucks. And so there will be bills, and there are bills in the legislature now that will preempt certain aspects of alcohol control. Didn't plan on talking about them tonight, but you're not likely to shut me up. The fact is that we have to watch for this, because local control is really important. That's what gives you the ability to shape your alcohol environment. Now, while you are determining what your licensing process is, how many outlets you have in your community, you can still move forward without changing policy, because moving into alcohol policy, that's kind of a scary thing, right? But fortunately, we got lots of laws on the books already, right? First thing you can do is you can enforce the minimum legal drinking age. Is anyone in this room unaware of what the minimum legal drinking age is? Just in case, it is 21, right? There is many protocols that have been written for alcohol age compliance checks. This is where a young person, a youth decoy, acting as an agent of law enforcement, goes in. Sometimes they present no ID, sometimes they present their own ID, or sometimes they're given an ID by law enforcement. More about that in a second. And they attempt to purchase alcohol. They don't try to look over their age. But the question is, will that licensee sell to them? A lot of places, they say, well, we fire anyone. The question that sells to underage. That's not the question. That just treats their clerks as disposable parts. The question is, are they training their staff, okay, to look for an ID? Alcohol age compliance checks help a community know if kids are getting a hold of alcohol from commercial outlets, all right? The other side of that, though, oh, I'm going to skip ahead, is social hosts. When you start clamping down on commercial access to alcohol, kids are smart. I sell those prenatal vitamins. Kids are smart, and they will, in fact, start looking for non-commercial sources, right? We have help in that area. After many court challenges and several court losses, Wisconsin has a law that makes it illegal, not a crime, but illegal to provide a location for underage drinking. So in other words, the felony bad parent that says, I had no idea what was going on in the basement, and the guy 2 miles down the road called in the noise complaint, that doesn't wash it anymore. If they knew, or they should have known. If they fail to take steps to prevent underage drinking on property they own, reside, control, they can get a $500 ticket. All the kids can get underage drinking tickets except for their kid who was with their parent. Okay? Enforce your social host laws. If you start doing alcohol age compliance checks, you need to start enforcing your social host laws. All right? Now, when you start enforcing those two, what do you think is going to happen to the first couple people that get citations? You will be able to hear them screaming without a telephone. So at that point, it's important for groups like you and your friends, to let your alderman know. I know a group of parents in River Falls that made an agreement when they first were talking about this sort of stuff. And it was every time they heard about a citation, they would pick up the phone and call their alderman and say, thank you for the police for enforcing the law. What a novel concept, okay? Because the people that are unhappy, they're going to complain. These guys never hear from the people that are happy. Second agreement, they'd write letters to the editor, because we know the people that get citations are going to, go find some real crime, right? Something along that line. So you need to be prepared to support the police when they enforce this, because the simple truth is the police can only enforce laws the community supports. Okay? Third point, click and collect. Everybody's heard about it, right? Yep, click list. Okay, your community will have to authorize alcohol sales in a parking spot in order for alcohol to be sold through click and collect, okay? When your community authorizes it, when they consider it, you may attach alcohol license conditions. They're just great, which deals with it, okay? Let's see if I included them in here. Nope. Oh. They can include some alcohol license conditions, like that the person has to be 21 years old, okay? They have to record the license plate number of the car that they are coming in, that it has to be a well-lit place. I went to one of the first click and collect locations in Appleton right after it got authorized. I drove to Appleton to see a parking spot. And what I saw was a parking spot at the back with no light around it. Now, we know that in January, somebody coming out is going to say, can I see your ID? And they're going to have their hood up and their hat on, and they're going to roll down their window about this much, right? And go slip the ID out. So it would be useful, A, to have light, but it would also be useful to know what car they're in, okay, in case there's a problem later, right? There's a whole list of license conditions you can use for click and collect. Alders think we want this. Merchants are telling people that we want this. I don't think it's too much of a hardship to ask people to stand up and walk into a store if they want to buy alcohol. I fully think we need to give food and drink and diapers, and also, I'm not going to ask someone that's got tiny little twins, they have to get them out of the car when it's below zero, but chances are she's there for diapers and milk and probably aspirin for her head if in that weather, okay? We're not stopping click and collect. We're simply talking about alcohol sales. So if you are interested in it or you hear about alcohol sales, you can go on to my website and look for that memo or drop me a line, and I'm happy to send it to you, okay? The other things you can do with this, aspects of the minimum legal drinking age, did you know, is anybody here near a college campus? Okay. Red cup parties, kids buy the cup, they're so smart, they're not gonna sell alcohol, they sell the cup, it's still an unlicensed tavern, and the police can cite them, and that citation is like over $1,000 in most communities. And when you add court costs in, it's a lot more. Noise ordinances and nuisance ordinances are very useful tools for A, breaking up underage drinking, but B, also out-of-control bars, okay? I know that one community in Wisconsin has had trouble cracking down on some bars that disturb the neighborhood because they don't have an effective noise ordinance. They haven't accumulated enough violations of alcohol law to do anything about it, and there's no noise ordinance. And noise is really the problem on an ongoing basis. Noise ordinances can really help you create a better alcohol environment. Now, our social host law that we have, let me go into some of the details for you. You have to be 18 or older to be cited under that. You who knowingly permits or fails to take action, okay? It's property that can be owned by the adult or occupied and under the control of the adult. It does include cabins, hotel rooms. I know that in some parts of the Milwaukee area, metro area, parents are renting hotel rooms for parties after dances because they don't want the mess in the basement. They could get a citation, $500 forfeiture. It does remain allowable for a child to drink as part of a religious service or if the parent is there and supervising their child, okay? So it really doesn't tackle some aspects of this, but this is a pretty good law. It's a pretty good law. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but some people tell me that overserving occurs in some of Wisconsin's bars. Yeah? Yeah, happens. It happens to me too. I see it. Overserving occurs in Wisconsin bars. Have you ever heard of a citation for overserving? No. So, we've developed a way that's used in other states to identify those licensees that have a pattern of overserving. And you don't even need to be police to do this. We know that on a national level, about half the people that get picked up for OWI are coming from a licensed bar or restaurant. It's just the way it works out, okay? So in Dane, Rock, and Greene County, we work with the police because they're with us on this. We look at the arrest report and a form required by the state patrol, and between those two, it's called the SP 4005, the Alcohol Drug Influence Report. People are asked, where were you drinking? And they answer the question. Isn't that great? And so we compile that data. We don't compile anything about the drivers. This is not about the drivers, okay? It's about the licensees. And then we sort them by the licensees' names. Now, when Waukesha did it for the first time, do you know what they discovered? 2 bars in the city of Waukesha each accounted for 10% each of their OWIs. They didn't know it. They didn't know it. Because the nature of drunk driving is you're at the bar or wherever you are, you get in your car and you drive away, right? You leave the seat. So we're actually providing in Dane, Rock, and Greene information that not only do the police not have, but the licensee doesn't have it either. And so we've actually found there's been no need to name and shame. We simply give it back to the police and they go and sit down, and when you have a list of dates and times and BACs these people were picked up with, it's a different conversation. We don't generally see a lot of repeat offenders, but we do see the police sit down and go through these. We're not going after everyone that ever got served at a bar and got picked up for OWI. The data we collect is simply used to determine if there's a pattern of overserving. No one is sanctioned from this data. In Waukesha, they use that data to authorize an undercover investigation. Tell you more about that in a second. In most places, they just authorize them to sit down and have a talk. And we've seen licensees go back and see who was on duty those days. Some people may have been reassigned, shall we say. Find out, look, and see what their drink specials are. If people are only getting picked up on the night that they have all you could drink or flat rate alcohol sales, that may not be a great idea, okay? So in fact, we see the licensees changing as well as the conversation changing. So this is a good process. It does require police cooperation. If anybody's interested in undertaking it in their community, let me know. But place of last drink data is very useful in identifying licensees that have a pattern of overserving. Not once, not twice, but there are people that put alcohol-impaired, seriously drunk drivers on the road night after night after night. Prayer is good, but the good Lord gave us brains, okay? He expects us to use them. Now, why do you think in Waukesha they found out that all this overserving was occurring? Here's a wild guess. It has something to do with that. Everybody was drunk. The servers were drunk, the patrons were drunk, everybody in the bar was drunk. They had a discussion, there was an interim sanction, but eventually what they realized was Waukesha needed a ordinance that requires servers to be legally unimpaired. In other words, they can't be more than 0.08, they have to be below 0.08. Now, it's different in some communities. In Wausau, it's 0.04. And other communities, you know why? Because a commercial driver, their per se BAC is 0.04, and their rationale being, if you're too drunk to drive commercially, you're too drunk to serve commercially. What other job can you hold where they actually let you get drunk? I mean, let's just think about this, okay? So communities that have a problem often look at sober server laws. They're very flexible. Most of your licensees will not object. Your big chains, you know, the Applebee's, places like that, they're not going to object because they already don't allow their servers to drink. But smaller bars sometimes do, and it really isn't appropriate. If a bar is supposed to be a supervised location, it doesn't work if the supervisor is drunk, right? Yes, ma'am.
How would they do that with, you know, to figure out if someone had too much or not?
What do you mean, when someone's driving away?
Like if they leave and they've had too, you've overserved them, how would they figure that out?
Well, in this particular case, it's people get picked up for drunk driving.
Right, but if they're gonna stop doing that, you know, at that bar that they come and talk to, how would they?
Determine that the servers are not drinking?
Well, no, just people, like if I go in there and I have 20 drinks, am I overserved?
Chances are pretty good.
Yeah. Do they count your drinks? Do they, you know, it's just that, you know, they monitor?
Bartenders are supposed to know the signs of intoxication. It's part of the training they go through. And most of them also receive training on how they can gently cut someone off without alienating the customer. It's just like most people in customer service are trained to deal with a whole range of sticky situations. The guy at the restaurant who forgot his credit card, things like that. Okay. So it's one of those things. On the sober server enforcement, if you go in to, most communities do what's called secondary enforcement. If they have to go to a bar in the first place because a fight broke out or something, and they suspect the server is impaired, then they breath test them. Nobody's driving around from bar to bar doing preliminary breath tests on bartenders. No one's got that kind of manpower. But it puts another tool in their toolbox. Yes, ma'am?
But the other thing, when bartenders attend bartending
School, right.
it's not to go and teach them how to make drinks. It's on teaching them how to recognize when someone's had to. So it's more of a preventive measure in bartending school.
Exactly. Unfortunately, Wisconsin law only requires one person on the premises to have taken this course while they're there, okay? And that guy can be down in the basement counting whiskey bottles or carrying the recycling out. So he's not always on top of it. Yes, sir?
I think the other thing that's exciting, because I didn't know about this, that's good, is that, you know, a long time ago in another life, I used to be a bartender. And so, but like, bar owners, I mean, a lot of times, like, they want to encourage their staff to drink. So that way, knowing that their staff then will, like, lower their inhibitions, be a little bit more flirty, and so far, you know, cause a much more fun time, which would have more people buying more booze, putting more money in their pockets. And so, like, that's the thing that you have to compete against, especially with these smaller bars, is like these bar owners, like, it's not just like all bartenders just want to get trashed, but a lot of times bar owners are like,
Yeah.
hey, welcome, oh, here, let me get you a shot, and like, they get you going,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get you a little bit
Loosened up.
so then that way everyone has more fun, supposedly.
Yes, ma'am.
So how do you enforce this if, like Anthony is saying, like, you know in Wisconsin, there's bar dice. I'm not sure if that's.
Oh, God, yes.
A Midwestern.
Oh, it's a Wisconsin.
It's a
It's
Wisconsin.
not legal anywhere else.
It's,
So how do you address that with that being such a community?
there was actually a WTMJ story on that about 2 weeks ago as part of their Drive Sober campaign. And in Appleton, this was the topic of extensive debate before they adopted their sober server ordinance. And they do have a system that when someone wants to throw dice, first, that some places don't allow them to drink, and they get a chip. But for throw dice, that's why the big debate was .08 or .04. If your bartender doesn't allow you, at the bar they interviewed for this story, if you wanted to buy your bartender a drink, you gave them a chip or the coupon, and then after their shift, they could drink. If you wanted them to drink, one of the reasons that it was .04 was the final recommendation a couple years ago that came out of the Scioto report, the Alcohol, Culture, and Environment report, is there are legitimate times that a server needs to drink. The waiter needs to be describing the wine. He needs to take a sip. A bartender at a brew pub needs to be able to describe these all. Doesn't mean they need to be flat out crawling on the floor drunk, but they do need to imbibe. So that's where the decision came down to .04 versus .08. That's why no one that I know of is, well, there is. The village of Jackson requires absolute sobriety. But other than that, it's usually .04 or .08 at the places that had any requirement at all, any limit specifically at all. Other questions? Oh, yes, sir. Ma'am. Sorry.
Local municipality mandate that all staff do the bartending training, or is there free?
It would depend on how they did it. That is a great question. Several communities tried to do it by ordinance, and the state of Wisconsin preempted them from doing it. But you can put it on as a license condition, okay? You can also strike an agreement with the licensee for a number of things that a community is preempted from doing. For example, that little bar across the corner where we all go and have hamburgers with our kids in the summer, across from me, they failed their alcohol age compliance check. Talk about total humiliation. I went with my alderman just so we could give him the evil eye. They actually agreed to have all their servers go through the training as a result. And actually, they agreed to have all of them as licensed operators in Wisconsin because of this failure. So opinion in the community, it helps, okay? Let's see, where are we here? Festivals and outdoors. I'm going to move pretty fast because I want to leave time for a little more questions, and I don't want to keep you later than we promised. Our friends at the University of Minnesota Alcohol Epidemiology program did research for a number of years, and they identified the two biggest problems at outdoor festivals. And I'm talking Summerfest down to the Middleton Hills Block Party, okay? When you get outside in the Midwest, you put up a couple of sawhorses, somebody's got a beer tent, right? You got for underage drinking and overserving. Those were the two problems. And then they identified 4 practices that would reduce the underage drinking and 7 policies and practices that reduce binge drinking, okay? There is a whole separate web page on festivals and outdoor events on the Wisconsin Alcohol Policy Project website. There is an observation tool that you can use to see how your local festivals measure up. And then there are descriptions of all of these different policies and how they work, all right? These are not bad policies. And one of the things that we found, once again, in common, prohibit the servers from drinking. Number 5, it's a bad habit in Wisconsin of paying your volunteers by letting them drink. And once again, I love the beer tent at my local festival. I was there this year, and they weren't letting the guys consume while they served, and it was a much better time for everyone. It's a good policy to have, okay?
I think it's interesting to have this policy, but like the Wisconsin State Fair, you just go up to any place and be like, I want a beer. And, of course, I got a beer, and I'm older and whatever, so they didn't ID me, so I don't really think much of that. But, are they IDing people at the serving spaces? Are they not? I was really surprised when I found out I didn't have to go get a wristband before I could go purchase alcohol once I went to the state. I just don't know very often, but I went this last year, and I was all like, what?
State properties operate under a whole separate set of rules than municipalities. For example, Union Terrace. Some of you may have gone to Union Terrace in Madison. That is not licensed by the city of Madison. It's state property, okay? I'm sure there's someplace at UWM that may sell a adult beverage best consumed in moderation, right? UWM? Yeah. Okay. Whoa. I want to mention that the amount of alcohol advertising our children see is significant. And believe it or not, a great deal of it is occurring locally. We don't often think about it. And you can take steps locally that would do it. One, eliminate alcohol advertising from your buses. You are not acting as a censor. That's the beauty of this. If you're talking about municipal property, you're not censoring their speech. This is not a free speech issue. You are the good steward of the public property, right? Bill de Blasio has banned alcohol advertising from all of New York property, okay? In Philadelphia, alcohol naming rights and alcohol advertising is banned from all property in Philly. Bay Area Rapid Transit, San Francisco, the big communities are banning it from public property. This was taken in front of my office in Madison. It's a gift wrap bus. We still have ways to go. But think about what you own. It may not just be buses. What about rec centers? Things like that. Start asking about the public property and then ask your local elected officials, are they being good stewards of the public property? Because it's not a free speech right. There are significant number of materials, briefs that are written. They are on the website for the Center on Alcohol, Marketing, and Youth. I'm happy to help anybody find them, okay? You can also limit alcohol advertising in the parks. Some parks, they actually put up ads backed by the baseball diamonds. Make sure it's not alcohol ads. You don't need the kids seeing that stuff, right? You can have a sign code that eliminates the likelihood that kids will see it. Now, this is called bollard advertising. It's those little ugly yellow posts that are in front of different convenience stores and gas stations so we don't drive in, right? This slips right over it, right? That's way low. If it only comes up to here on me, it's got to be probably up to here on most of you, right? But who's going to see that?
Kids.
You betcha. Alcohol advertising 36 inches or less from the fore, that's a child's eyesight, and people know it. We sent Quick Trip a letter earlier this year saying, gee, we know you didn't realize it, but you're advertising beer to toddlers. And they sent me back a one-line reply, we obey the law. So working with the Wisconsin Public Health Association, we identify sign codes that prohibit or limit bollard advertising, and then we rat them out to the local police when we find the bollard advertising, okay? You can see what your local sign code is. No community ever got uglier for fewer beer signs. I absolutely swear it. Many communities already have a limit in the sign code on how much of the window can be covered by advertising that's posted inside. Most communities have that, but it's not in top of anybody's enforcement list. Fond du Lac, kids went and measured, and then they did a presentation to the city council, and when the building inspector didn't do anything about it, they went back to the city council and asked to have all the alcohol advertising removed. If your city has limits on the amount of window that can be covered by alcohol advertising, or it requires a clear line of sight inside, if alcohol is sold there, many communities have that as well. I have a tool that you can use that tells you exactly step by step. It's got the forms, it's all set, ready to go, how you can organize it. It's a great activity for kids because kids see these signs. We're kind of just dazed, we don't notice them anymore. They spot them right away. You can reduce youth exposure to alcohol advertising by getting it off municipal property and having a strong sign code. And then I'm going to ask for your help, because I can't help myself. Who regulates advertising for the alcohol industry? Nobody. The alcohol industry regulates it for itself. And who is the enforcement arm? They have voluntary codes. Who enforces them? We do. We do. And we can, and it does make a difference. In late 2016, these started showing up all over Wisconsin. Those are little bottles of vodka. That looks like a little rubber ball, doesn't it? It's a bottle of vodka. 5 complaints from a hospital, from a public health department, from a community coalition in Evansville, a professor of public health law, and me. We filed complaints with the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, and guess what happened? This is off the market, okay? We can make a difference if we do this. It took 2 years to get that little thing off the market. But if you see a product, it appeals to children, give me a call. I'll help you with the complaint. And I've done up a nice little how-to kit for you. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't enforce it, even if it takes forever, the industry says, well, we must be doing a great job because nobody complains. Okay? We need to be able to say, you have this system and it is not protecting our children. These were sold in Wisconsin for over a year. That is not protecting our children. Kids wanted those. Whoops. So this is what I need you to do. Stop thinking this is just the way it is. It isn't. It's changing in other communities. It can change in yours. Stop thinking that more alcohol outlets are economic development. It's the exact opposite. It's more money on your property tax bill. And we love our property tax bills here, right? We have to stop thinking the real problem is drunk drivers, because it isn't. And fourth, we have to stop thinking that a handful of drunk drivers is the real problem with alcohol. 74% of the people that are arrested for drunk driving in Wisconsin never reoffend, okay? The problem is binge drinking and the horrific consequences that come from this. Determine your problems. Use the 4 A's. It's a hip pocket tool. There are lots of things that you can do that are nice, but the A's, available, attractive, acceptable, those are 3 ways that if you do something that affects that, you are improving the alcohol environment, okay? And affordability, well, we're just going to have to wait for the state legislature on that, okay? You can adopt and implement evidence-based policies and practices, and then realize we're going to have to do patience, because especially with outlet density, we're doing this for our grandkids, okay? And some of us are closer to having grandkids than others in this room, so we're all doing it for our grandkids. Do not hesitate to reach out to me, all right? I live to help folks with this, and that's Carrie's smiling because she knows that's true. I want to end with a little tiny story. This was the ad that was on Philadelphia bus shelters when they started it. A young alderman named Michael Nutter decided he didn't like seeing little kids standing there waiting for a school bus with an ad of sexualized young lady. So he started working to remove alcohol advertising from all the bus shelters. That's where he began. People said, you ain't gonna be able to do it. It's, Anheuser-Busch is gonna kill you. You're killing your political career. Well, about 18 months later, after getting Anheuser-Busch to agree, their only compromise, they got to keep their eagle on the Eagle Stadium scoreboard. They got to keep their Anheuser-Busch Eagle on the scoreboard. They agreed to phase it out. The ordinance that prohibits alcohol advertising or naming of any city property passed nearly unanimously in the Philadelphia City Council. And not long afterwards, Michael Nutter was elected mayor. So it did not destroy a political career. People know courage when they see it. He had it. People here have it too. So I really look forward to seeing all the improvements in the alcohol environment, large and small, that we can do together. And we still have time for questions if people have them.
I didn't really have a question, I just wanted to make a comment on
Sure.
the acceptability piece. You
Yeah.
talked about advertising as a way to look at it. But I think that there's another part of that too that is like not even just advertising itself, but the reality of, in Wisconsin specifically, the number of locations and types of places that alcohol can actually be at.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that going into a grocery store, the place where you go to get the food to nourish you, is a place where alcohol is. Going into a pharmacy, a place where you get medicine to cure you, is a place where alcohol is. I mean, all of those things, that adds to, again,
You're welcome. Thanks for
that sort
coming.
of, when you look at such high rates of drinking in Wisconsin, well, if it's so normalized. I mean, of
Yeah.
course you drink. I mean, it's everywhere around you. And so, I mean, I think those are other things that I think also.
And there's some ways you can do that. One of the things that I've seen some communities have success with is declaring 1 or 2 parks alcohol-free, and you don't say you're doing it because you want an alcohol-free park. You talk about a recovery-friendly park, right? There are a lot of people that are not in recovery that just really don't want to take their kids or have a family picnic where other people are carousing or drinking or throwing beer cans next to them. Some people for religious purposes or just because they want the peace and quiet, or maybe they are in recovery, want to go to a place where it's just going to be soft drinks and coffee and water. And having recovery-friendly areas in our communities, that's going to be important because we have to support people that are in recovery. It's not easy to be in recovery in Wisconsin. Yes, ma'am.
I remember going to the comedy club and, they have the 2 drink minimum. And I always say, no, I'm sorry, I'm in recovery. I wasn't, but I think that.
Did they let you in and give you get a pop, or did?
Yeah, it just,
Yeah.
something else. But I thought that was so, you can't force me to drink.
No.
So it's like, we have 2 drink minimum. I was like, give me a Sprite, I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're all in recovery in Wisconsin. Trust me on that. But, that's a great idea. And it's not to minimize the struggles that people in recovery have, but no, they shouldn't be focusing that. Now, the other issue you raised, that alcohol is sold everywhere. We can fix that. One of the things, stop licensing more locations. But also, if you look on this, most of you did take it, for which I'm grateful. If you look on here where it says the licensed premises on the application, you don't have to put an address there. You can put part of an address. You can put on there, let's see what page that's on. Well, you guys look for that and I'll finish, because we only got 5 minutes left, because I promised I wouldn't keep people late. That in the area for the licensed premises, a lot of people thought you had to put an address. And when you put an address, that means the whole building is licensed. That's how Target ends up with alcohol everywhere. And Kroger ends up with alcohol everywhere. No. You can say 200 square feet emanating from the rear southwest corner. You can say no more than 50 square feet that is against the western wall. You can write your license premises very, very tailored. You have to do it for every license because it's one of those discipline things, but you do not have to license everywhere. Now, I sat on city council, so I know what they say. They say, we'd really like the flexibility. Well, wouldn't we all? But I'm not going to give them flexibility on that because I've seen too many times where I have seen the stuffed animals with the alcohol, with the Valentines, with the candy. Too many times I've seen stuffed animals wrapped in bottles of alcohol and baskets prepackaged for Christmas. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Here's a teddy bear holding a 6-pack. They're packaged, and those things can get mixed in with the toys. When you have a tight licensed premises, you're going to really restrict the amount of alcohol they can have there and where it is. You can keep it away from the children. So there are ways around it. Takes time. Yes, ma'am.
It's a new phenomenon. Like, I know places in New York are having more dry bars and different places where they don't serve any alcohol. Do you know if there's any data on the impact of these
I think they're too soon. I only know of one in Madison. Are there any in Milwaukee? I don't know of any here. There's one in Madison. It only opened up less than 2-3 months ago, so I don't think there's any data. I know that there are coffee shops that are remaining open later in the evening now, and hosting music and things like that. They're not necessarily part of the, what is it called, sober curious movement, but they're just recognizing there is a need for a late night gathering spot that does not involve alcohol, and they're trying to fit that need. Yes, Cece.
Do you know if there's any data for, like, a lot of bars, this is strictly anecdotal, like the bars where I went to college, if you were there and you didn't want to drink, if you ordered like a pop or a water, they would give it to you for free. I've noticed that a lot of bars in Wisconsin, they'll still charge you for that. Is there any data that that's effective to offer people? Because I've been to bars with friends where they
Yeah.
I was going to drink, but they're going to charge me for a Coke, I might as well just buy a beer.
Yeah, I know that there are a number of places that if you're wearing a designated driver pin, they will give you your pop for free. That's the only situation where if you're not drinking, you would get free pop because it's part of a larger program. One of the things we have to remember on this is if the goal is to reduce the alcohol consumption as such, we kind of got to get away from the idea that it's all about getting people home. It's all about getting people to a cab safely or having a friend drive them home. It's about drinking a little bit less. Now, one of the reasons you will see that sometimes members of the hospitality or alcohol industry object to these, they will talk till the day comes and goes, like my time is rapidly going, where you talk about the need for designated drivers and different programs that provide free rides home, right? Why do they like those as opposed to having other programs like sober bartenders or things like that? Exactly. They like programs that occur after the money's left on the bar. So keep more of your money in your pocket and work really hard to create a better alcohol environment. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that you have, so there's no rush to get out of here. But I know people have other things to do, and I want to respect your time because you have been such a great audience. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.